Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. So before you tonight, we have the final plat for the Picabu Estates addition to the city of Moscow. If you recall, I highlighted in red in the center of your screen is the property. It's 9.3 acres. To familiarize yourself, you've got Orchard Avenue here running north-south on the west side, Highland Drive area here to the west. You've got Evergreen Hills addition, which is primarily single-family to the south. You also have Blackwood Estates to the east, which includes Sloniker Drive and Lanny Lane. Surrounding the property is primarily single-family residential. You do have some rural residential properties to the north, and then there's the city limits boundary and the faint orange line there to the northeast. This was the preliminary plat that had gone through. This is just overlaid on the aerial image just to give you an idea of what the subdivision is going to look like. You see the connectivity with the intersection of Highland Drive there. You've got the extension of Lanny Lane, which extends from the Blackwood Estates subdivision here to the east, running through the property. You also have Picabu Street, which is a street stub intended to head directly north when the properties to the north end up getting developed in the future. So we just wanted to recall what's happened up until this point. On February 24th, 2016, this had gone to Planning and Zoning Commission at a public hearing. The Commission recommended approval with 3 conditions. Then went on to Council on March 21st, and the Council approved it with the same 3 conditions as well as 3 additional conditions, which totaled 6. The first condition was that Orchard Avenue right-of-way has to match the dedication, which happened through the Evergreen Hills development to the south of the proposed subdivision. So if you recall, there was a portion of this property that actually went into the Orchard right-of-way, or they owned into the street. And so this was going to be required to be dedicated, and that was going to match what was previously dedicated as part of that Evergreen Hills addition. Public utilities needed to be extended to the northern subdivision boundary of Picabu Street, and this is in order to facilitate development to the north, should that happen at some point in the future, to be able to connect to utilities within Picabu Estates addition. The developer needed to verify that the Picabu Street location was viable for a future extension. So if you recall, there's a series of freshwater ponds. Public Works Department just wanted to verify that the street was going to be able to veer around those to the northeast, and that has been verified. And then the fourth condition was the developer entered into a purchase agreement for the city to acquire Tract A. This was the water booster station parcel at the intersection of Orchard and Lanny, or to increase the lot area to meet the minimum lot area requirements of the R1 zone. And so on your agenda tonight would be the purchase of that parcel. And then Lanny Lane be constructed, the alternative design developed by staff, and includes a 10-foot wide path on the south side of the public right-of-way of Lanny. So if you recall, Lanny Lane's currently designated as a collector, recognizing that it probably won't see collector volumes of traffic anytime soon. Staff had worked with the applicant in order to come up with an alternative street design for Lanny, and that included a 10-foot wide path on the south side of the street and allowed them to retain parking on-street parking on both sides of the street, and until at some point in the future where one side of the street could be stripped of parking and a bike lane be installed. And then that the 10-foot sidewalk be continued on the west side of Picabu Street heading to the north. If you recall, in our Pathways Master Plan, there was a portion of Paradise Path that was proposed to be extended to the north, and this is just to accommodate the future extension of the path as we head north. This was the final plat that was submitted, so you can see the Lanny Lane that goes through the property, Orchard Avenue, Picabu Street heading due north here, and you can see Tract A, which is intended to be the booster station parcel. Tract B is the parkland dedication, as well as the stormwater detention pond, which happens to be on the east side of the parkland. This is just a closer up view, the west side of the development, the east side. And then there was some discussion, Planning and Zoning Commission, City Council level, about the confusion between Landy Lane and Lanny Lane. You have the Landy Lane extension in the Highland Drive area here, and we have Lanny, which is proposed to extend through the subdivision. At the committee level, there was some discussion about this, continued discussion. Public Works had reached out to a couple property owners in Blackwood Estates. Currently there's 2 addresses that have Lanny Lane addresses. As you can imagine, those residents weren't too happy about having their name, the name of the street potentially changed, or their address. And since the committee meeting, Public Works had gone out and reached out to the other owners on Landy Lane and really got the same response, that they were not too enthusiastic about having their street names changed, and all those implications of change of address and on their mortgage documents and all of that. And so what Public Works had come up with as a proposed solution, usually we'd start numbering, as you can see down here in the Evergreen Hills edition. It starts in the 1200s. What Public Works would propose to do would start in the 1400s as you head east. I think these addresses are in the 1600s and 1700s, as well as possibly change the name from Lanny Lane to Lanny Drive. And so that was the last the council discussed it, at the committee meeting, and so that that's the work that's been done after the committee meeting. So. With that, staff has certainly reviewed the final plat for conformance with city and state code requirements. We found it to be in conformance, and staff recommends the council approve the final plat for Picabu Estates Edition with no conditions. And I have no conditions here, but certainly if the council wishes to change the street name, we'd have to have that as a condition of approval. So okay. With that, I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Walter.
Mike may have answered my question with his last sentence, which is the change has not been made by staff, but you're telling council that if we wish to do so, we can.
Yeah, the change is currently not made on the final plat. It's my understanding the developer's fine with that change, but yeah, it certainly could be a condition of approval on the final plat that we make that change.
Thank you.
I have one more, and I'm not sure this is the place to ask it, but did we reach a resolution on Tract A development versus the Phase 1, Phase 2 of the development? Because Tract A falls under Phase 2 of the development, and did we conclude that that was not an impediment to the installation of the booster station?
I can answer that. We modified the language in the contract to say excluding any work that the city may do on a city facility. But that's in the development agreement. That's not in this one.
Okay.
And I remember there was a question at Public Works and Finance about the lot prices that had to do with the booster lot. And then we had some notes about that, and I was just kind of curious of why that came back up in our packet. Did someone ask that? Do you remember?
We're going to address that.
Okay.
It's on the agenda.
All right.
We'll address that at another item.
Things get a
Thanks.
little fuzzy around the edges. So, okay, so relative to the Picabu Estates final plat, any other comments?
Mike, has there been like a lot of public comment about the 2 street names that are similar, and is it mostly the fire department that's interested in those 2 names being similar, or who's?
We didn't receive any comment from the fire department with that concern. I believe Councilman Steed had reached out to the chief, and I believe his response was that he could live with it. It's not the greatest. At Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, we had a little bit of testimony. There wasn't a whole lot. The developer of the Blackwood Estates to the east, had stated that Lanny was, I believe, the sentimental name to him, so it was named after, I believe, his wife. And then there was some discussion, public testimony at Planning and Zoning Commission on Landy off of Highland Drive, and apparently that has the same issue with being named after some type of relative associated with the development of that subdivision. But it wasn't really discussed at great length. It was just brought up. It was more of a discussion as Lanny Lane being a through street, and then the alternative street design were the main points of discussion, as well as the drainage heading down through the property. But yeah, they were touched, but they weren't really discussed at length.
So there's no major point of contention about if we just leave it the way it is. If we just leave it Lanny Lane and Landy Lane, pretty much everybody's okay with that?
No, I think we're going to address that in the motion and just make that a condition.
If I may, if I were the one on either one of those having a heart attack, I would not want somebody to find out they're in the wrong place.
I've been in a number of towns over the years that have got similar situations where they have northwest and southeast. The name of the street is the same, but you follow it down and you find out that it's northwest and southeast or something similar to that. Apparently, the fire trucks, EMS people, police department are able to find out just exactly where they're supposed to go, and they do it. So I don't see a problem with leaving it the way it is. I think it's not an issue.
John, if you've got Northwest 21st Street and Southwest 21st Street, those are two different names to me. If somebody says there's a fire on 21st Street, the first thing the dispatcher should say is which one. Landy Lane and Lanny Lane, in my mind, and in others, because we've had confusion even within committee talking about it, they sound enough alike that I'm not sure the person taking the 911 call would get the correct one. Not a mistake, just that that's not what I heard. And when they put it out and put it on the GPS for the police or the fire, it's going to direct them to the wrong one if they heard it wrong. I just think it's a risk that we don't, if we have an opportunity to clarify it a little bit, we ought to take the opportunity.
Okay, I move that we approve the Picabu Estates Edition final plat with the condition of the name change of Lanny Lane to, you said Lanny Drive.
Second.
Walter?
Would that also include the addressing number changes that y'all have talked about, or does that need to be in the motion?
That would include those.
Okay.
Any more discussion?
Yeah, what are we
Does
talking
anything,
about?
does anything with this name change cause anybody to have to change their address?
Well, certainly the two that are currently on Lanny Lane currently would eventually have to change their address to Lanny Drive instead of Lanny Lane. So there would be two properties affected. You know, I would imagine that they would have to change their mortgage documents as well. So they would have to go through some type of process in order to do that.
Why those two and not the other two?
Because you're
Because
not proposing to change that name.
because that one's there and not part of a new subdivision, it would seem to be an appropriate time to rectify any confusion now with the new subdivision coming in.
Is there something, if we do change this, is there some way we're compensating the people that are inconvenienced by this?
No.
That hasn't been part of the
For
conversation.
that reason, I would propose an amendment to the motion on the table that the city pay any hard cost of refiling incumbent upon those two properties.
I have much less of a problem if you do that.
Gary?
That issue isn't before you tonight, and I'm not sure if that is something that the city should consider doing or not. The city retains the right to change street names in the public interest. The city makes a lot of regulations that they direct citizens to do that they do not directly compensate them for. I'd say you're on very tentative ground here, and I would not want you to take that step lightly without us conducting some research.
Yeah, I agree.
I've not heard of that ever being done before.
There's an amended motion on the table, but with no second to this point, Mr. Chair.
I don't hear any seconds, so the amendment perishes. So we have a motion and we have a second for approval of the final plat with the condition that Lanny Lane be changed to Lanny Drive and retain the renumbering as proposed by city staff, along with the other conditions as iterated previously. John?
Well, I'm in favor of Picabu Estates. I like what's going on out there, but I probably going to have to vote against this just because I think it is ridiculous that we change the name of a street because it sounds like another street. I don't think that's, it's not something that the developer wants to do. It's not something the engineer that is hired by the developer thinks it's a good thing to do. We're just saying, we don't like what you're doing here, and so we're going to change it. And if I have to vote against the total process, which I guess I will, I'll vote against it. You folks do what you feel you got to do.
Yeah, I have a problem with inconveniencing people or causing them difficulty over something that might happen at some point in the future. So I'm with John on that.
I appreciate what you both have to say. This went to committee and to planning and zoning several times. There were a lot of conversations about this, so it was not taken lightly at all. Everything that you have said was considered, but it really had to do with what Walter's saying, which is about safety. That's really the crux of what the whole issue is about.
I think so too. I think it's our chance now at the inception of the subdivision to clarify these two very similar sounding street names and get it right, just because anytime somebody's on a 911 call, they are not in the best voice that they've ever been in their life, and the chances for confusion do exist. And sometimes if it's somebody who doesn't live there who's calling it in, they just know I'm on Lanny or Landy Lane. They don't know the exact address or anything like that, and so they call it out to 911, and who knows where the response services show up. So I think that with the two properties in question needing to change it from Lanny Lane to Lanny Drive is something that, other than a few legal documents, can be accomplished over time. The mail is still going to get there, and they'll have a right long period of time to change the credit card bills and things like that so that they hit the right spot. Walter?
John, my understanding is that Lanny Lane is not a product of the current developer that's before us. It was done when Blackwood subdivision was created 10 or so years ago. That's when the name first occurred. The city, we didn't catch it, we didn't realize it until it was extended in the present project over to Orchard and put it within a half a block of Landy, and people started seeing it. So I don't think that we're particularly picking on this developer or doing something that they mind, and their engineer has been at all of these meetings, and I'm pretty sure at one Public Works we asked him specifically, would this be a problem to make this change? And I think he indicated it would not.
I remember the same thing.
Yeah, I don't have any sort of problem with changing the name or anything. I just have a problem with costing people money. There's got to be, like Gary said, if there's some process we have to go through in order to compensate these people for the inconvenience, then we should probably go through it.
I guess I'm unsure of what the cost in money would be. Most deeds don't even have an address on it. They have a lot and block number and the subdivision identification. I'm not sure that anything needs to be changed except to inform your bank and those you deal with that Lane is being changed to Drive. You know, certainly I'm not representing that as a legal opinion, but I'm not sure that check your deeds and see if there's a change, but I don't think there's going to be a cost to this.
If it's just a minor inconvenience, I guess I don't have a problem with it, but I want to put people in a situation where it costs them money to do something because somebody else thinks it might be a problem at some point in the future.
Yeah.
I don't want to step on people's toes unnecessarily.
I understand.
I agree with you, Jim, I just don't like the idea of us going in and saying, you two people, you don't live where you thought you lived. You have an address on your checks, you have an address on your business cards. Your grandmother thinks you live such and such, and we're telling you you don't. And we're telling you you don't because something might possibly happen in the future, and at the same time, it may not happen in the future, but we're just going to tell you this is how it's got to go. I can't do that.
The idea that we're just changing it from lane to drive is probably, pretty minimal, I can kind of go with that, but that's my concern, is that it costs somebody some money or a lot of inconvenience, and we don't really get anything for it. So,
Okay, I think we're hitting the same positions and gone circular, so let's see, I think we're on Walter.
Aye.
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 No,
Okay, so final plat passes with the conditions that we've spoken about.